welcome to New England Authors. So good to have you with us. We try to bring different aspects of New England, and our author today is Sondra Helene. And welcome to the show, Sondra. Your first novel is called Appearances, and it reads like a first-person memoir, and it's very similar to a memoir. Why didn't you write a memoir instead of? It's based on a true story, right?
Yes. Well, thank you. It's very nice to be here. I appreciate it. It does read like a memoir. Originally, I was going to write a memoir.
Yeah.
But I needed to, because it is inspired by a true story based on my sister's illness. But I wanted to dramatize the story.
Yeah.
I wanted to be able to make scenes up, and I wanted to add more to the drama of the story than just having than the drama itself of my sister having lung cancer was terrible.
So your sister Elizabeth had pain in her hip, and she went to have an MRI, and then that's the beginning of the story. We find that something is seriously wrong. Can you tell us a little about that?
Yes. So are we talking about my sister in real life, or are we talking about Elizabeth?
No, we're talking about the novel.
Okay, the novel.
We'll keep it that way.
Okay. So Elizabeth, in the novel, she was 43 years old, and she and her sister Samantha were very, very close.
Yeah.
And they would meet oftentimes to exercise or to walk, talk about the kids, and one day they met at the reservoir in Brookline. And Elizabeth was walking, and she said her hip was killing her to her sister. And Samantha said, well, maybe you should make an appointment for an MRI. And she said, I already have one. And she had it that night. And it was before the days, it was in the year, this book was based off of the year 2003. It was before the days of even the iPhones. So as soon as she got home from her MRI, her landline rang. And it was the doctor, and he said something was seriously wrong. So that's how the novel starts.
And it turns out that she had lung cancer.
Yes, she had stage 4 lung cancer right away, because there were no other symptoms aside from that pain in her hip. So she wasn't short of breath, she didn't have breathing issues, she didn't have a cough, she wasn't tired. But she just had a pain in her hip, and it was maybe for a few weeks before she actually went to the doctor. But it wouldn't have mattered. Once that pain was in her hip, it had metastasized from her lungs to her hip, which we didn't realize when they first said it was metastatic cancer. They didn't know where the original location was at the beginning.
Stage 4 means metastasized cancer?
Yes. Means
now, you said that lung cancer, and she never smoked. Your sister never smoked.
No, she never smoked.
I'm sorry, when I say your sister, you wrote the story in the first person, right?
I did. I wrote it I wrote in the first person.
So that's why I say.
Okay, so Samantha's sister never smoked.
Samantha's sister never smoked. Okay, and you said that lung cancer is the deadliest cancer, the most prevalent cancer?
It is. It's the number one cancer that kills people in the United States. It's more prominent than what happens is because they detect it when it's too late. So that's why it kills so many people. And also, we found out that there was an epidemic of young women in their 40s who would get lung cancer, who were non-smokers. Or, some people might have puffed a few cigarettes in high school or something like that, but that's really considered a non-smoker. There's non-smokers and there's never smokers.
Right.
But even if somebody had a few cigarettes in high school or college and then didn't smoke for 20 years, they wouldn't get lung cancer.
So what were these women in their 40s who were, what was the cause of that?
The physicians don't know. It could be environmental, it could be a genetic predisposition, but they said it was bad luck. That's what they told us.
So your sister I'm sorry, you in the novel became a speech therapist, right?
Yes.
The first person in the novel Samantha was a speech therapist, and so she knew some of the medical landscape, right? And in the book, Samantha does all this research about her sister's illness. Yeah.
Yes, Samantha was a speech therapist, and she also, after she stopped working as a speech therapist, she used to volunteer in at the Beth Israel Deaconess Medical Center,
right.
And she did a lot of fundraising for that hospital. So, and she actually did fundraising for the cancer center. So she knew some things about cancer, but I think she said in the novel that she never thought, when she was doing the fundraising, she never thought it would be for her own family, especially at that age when she was in her 40s, or for her own sister, maybe for a parent or something like that. So, so she knew, she would research on the internet a lot.
And she knew it was bad. She knew that her sister didn't have long to live, right?
She knew that.
Yeah.
However, throughout the novel, the sisters and the whole family still had hope. And sometimes they thought there would be divine intervention. Elizabeth, when she was sick, she never looked sick. She looked healthy all the time, except when she started the chemo and she lost her hair.
Yeah.
But even she got a beautiful wig. So she didn't look like a cancer patient. She was beautiful, and she could do everything. She still exercised.
She used to exercise.
Yeah, she still exercised. She still did all of the things that she used to do before she was diagnosed. And then so she went through 6 rounds of chemotherapy and radiation, and then after that, she was able to start a pill called Arissa at the time. Now it's Tarceva.
Yeah.
But and then her life went back to normal. She never was in a complete remission.
Yeah.
She was in a partial remission, but the cancer didn't spread. And I remember the quotes of the doctors saying, "Absence of progression is a victory."
Yeah. In fact, I'm going to get a little ahead of the story. It metastasized to her brain at one point, and the doctors were able to keep her alive for quite a while.
Yes.
In the story.
Yep.
That's a real thing that happens, right? As opposed to in the novel.
So lung cancer can metastasize to the brain. Yes.
Yeah.
That's what happens with lung. If somebody, it can. Yes.
So when the Samantha went into the doctor's office with her sister and got the news, and Samantha's reaction was rage. She was very angry, right? Is that common?
She was angry, and she was devastated.
Yeah.
She couldn't believe what she was hearing, and Elizabeth. All Elizabeth thought about were her kids.
Yeah.
And Elizabeth's husband was heartbroken.
Yeah. So Elizabeth had a goal at one time to live to see her children graduate high school, right?
Yes.
Yeah. That's being very realistic. She seemed very realistic in the book.
Yes, she was realistic with that.
So now we get to some of the parts that might be fictional here.
Yes.
So there was a tension between Samantha and Samantha's husband and
Elizabeth.
And Elizabeth and her husband. Yeah, that might be the part that was dramatized?
Yes, that's the part that was dramatized.
And why did you bring that into the story?
Well, I thought in order to write a novel, even though the inspiration was my sister's illness, I wanted a story, like a whole book that people would want to read, and I didn't want to just make it a cancer story because it's so sad what happened to my sister.
Yeah.
So originally, as I said, I was going to write a memoir, and then it was all about cancer.
Yeah.
So then I said, you know what, I have to put a lot of family drama in this, and to spice up the story.
Yeah. I think you did that successfully. By the way, this is New England Authors, and we're talking about Sondra Helene, and this is a book. Her book is Appearances. Could you tell us why the book is titled Appearances?
Yes, I titled it Appearances because Samantha, was living the good life, like she had it all.
Right.
And then none of her friends or anyone like that knew about all the tension between her husband and her sister's husband. So it's like, to the outside world or to the outside person, Samantha could be like a person that said, wow, look at her. Maybe someone would envy a life like that. But, sometimes no matter what someone has in life, privilege does not lead to protection. So.
Interesting. So Samantha and her husband are pretty well off. They travel in high circles.
Right.
And still something happens to Elizabeth. So you mention a lot your Jewish faith. I'm sorry, or Samantha's Jewish faith.
Well, I'm Jewish also. So I took that from my own experience.
Yes,
so.
and Samantha's husband used to read the Torah in high holy days in the synagogue. Did Samantha's faith and Elizabeth's religious faith, did that help in coping with this?
A little bit.
A little bit.
Samantha went to speak to her rabbi to try to, to say, why would something like this happen to a young, vibrant woman? But there were no answers, really, that, no one could say, like, why bad things happen to good people. There were no answers. But the rabbi was able to give Samantha some comfort in prayers. Like there's a prayer called the Mishabera. The community prays on an ill person's behalf, and so that was helpful. And then Samantha went to get the Kabbalah store and got the red strings to keep the evil eye away from Elizabeth and her. And their father always used to wear a chai around his neck. And there's one scene in the novel where you see him taking off the chai and putting it around his daughter's neck, like as if he was giving her life.
Yes, yeah.
So that was a very touching scene.
Samantha there is really very close to her sister, and she just wants to do good things for her. And there's a tension at one time. As I said, there's a tension between her husband and her sister. And at one time she kind of has to choose between which one does she want, her to be with her dying sister or to be with her husband.
Right. So what happened is Richard, Samantha's husband, thought that the two sisters were too close.
Yeah.
He wanted a little bit of separation. And so before Elizabeth got sick, there was that stress that's permeated the family. So then when she got sick, and Samantha used to try to please her husband, okay, well, I won't exercise with Elizabeth as much or whatever. But then once Elizabeth got sick, Samantha said to him, sorry, I'm going to be with my sister. And that's what I'm going to do. And Samantha ended up being with her all the time. Going to all her doctor's appointments, and she and Elizabeth's husband Jake, Elizabeth and Jake were childhood sweethearts.
That's her husband.
Jake, Elizabeth's husband, and
Jake,
and he was devastated. When she was diagnosed, and he just it was three. It was Elizabeth, Jake, and Samantha were the three musketeers, as you would call it.
So I've been so confused. I've been confusing everybody with the real story and your personal story. Can I go to your personal story? What was it like when your sister had this awful cancer that wasn't her fault? What was it? What did you feel?
I felt, well, I was the older sister. And my whole life I looked after her in some way or another. Whatever, like when we were children, we shared a bedroom and I would make sure she was breathing. Or if she was sick, I would, our mother was took care of us, but I just was born with that responsibility. So when she was diagnosed with lung cancer, I was devastated, and I was like, why her, not me? I felt guilty that I was healthy and she was sick, and I didn't know what I just couldn't do enough for her.
Yeah.
At the time we both had children. My daughter and her two children are about the same age, and we just stayed at their house a lot. We went there all the time.
Yeah. So you waited about, in your real life story, you waited about 10 years to write this fictional book. And did you need that much time to get some distance?
Yes, I did. But what happened is I started writing the memoir 10 years ago.
Yes.
So, and I started with an organization called Grub Street.
Grub Street here in Boston.
Yeah, which is one of the premier writing organizations in the entire country now.
Right.
So I started taking classes there. I took Jumpstart Your Writing. I took Memoir 1, Memoir 2. I would take Personal Essay. And then I started taking Fiction 1, Fiction 2. And then I said, wow, after a while I realized that I had more of a story to tell than just a memoir.
Yeah.
So, but it took a while, because if I had published something even 5 or 7 years ago, it would have been a very different book.
Yeah. So you took a lot of writing courses, and that helped you. Were you trying to? You said you felt guilty in real life. Was this some attempt to deal with that?
It was attempt to deal with feeling guilty that I was still here and my sister wasn't anymore. But also, it was cathartic writing, and I got to be with my sister for a long time, writing scenes about, even scenes that aren't in this book. But taking the writing classes, I got to be with her, scenes I wrote about when we were teenagers or in our 20s and things like that. So I got to spend a lot of time with her, even though she wasn't here anymore.
So there's another thing I noticed in the book, that you write not only in the first person, which is why I get confused, but you also write in the present. Was that a choice you made? Most novels are written in the past. He did this, he did that, but this is right in the present. Why did you make that choice?
That was a choice that I did make. I felt it was more compelling. I felt like I could take the reader by the hand and go through the story that way. And it was like happening in real time, even though I did say that it was 2003. But I did make the choice. I did think about doing it in past tense. The first couple of drafts were in past tense, and then some of my editors, when I started putting it in present tense, they said, wow, this is very compelling in present tense. So I changed it.
So, was there some things that you deliberately left out of the story because you felt it was uncomfortable?
There's a lot of things that were left out of the story. Yes, there were a lot of things that were left out because, in terms of my sister's illness, I didn't want to. I did share a lot of medical information in this book, but there's a lot that I didn't share.
You mean medical facts?
Medical facts and different situations during chemotherapy and things like that.
I think you did a good job of that, because there are a lot of medical facts here, and they're very interesting, but they're certainly not an overwhelming amount. So writing this was a kind of a healing for you, right?
It was healing. It actually helped me grieve, and it helped me heal. And then, I tried to make some type of art, a story about it, and involve it in a much bigger story. And people who have read it have been able to relate to a lot of different parts of it, even if somebody doesn't have a loved one who died of cancer. For example, people have said to me, wow, the sister relationship, my sister just called me and said she was getting divorced, and I ran to New Jersey to go be with her. And my husband kept saying, why do you have to go to New Jersey every weekend to be with your sister? And she said, because I have to. She's my sister. So, there's a sister type of bond. There's a family dynamic type of situation that they're like, oh God, this one in my family doesn't talk to my brother, doesn't talk to the brother-in-law. So I've gotten a lot of comments on the family dynamics. One of the websites said, if you like the show This Is Us, you'll like the show appearance. You'll like the book appearances.
Oh, I see. Okay.
Because it's filled with drama.
All right. So, what about the conflicting loyalties in the book? That's an important part of the book, isn't it?
It's very important because what happened is Samantha was so close to her sister, and then she also had her husband who wanted them separated, and she felt very torn. Because she didn't want to be separated from her sister, and she loved her husband. She didn't want to get divorced, and she kept trying to please everybody. But at the end, she learns that you can't please everybody. You can only do it and please yourself.
So we won't give that part of the story away, but the other part of the story is kind of obvious. Your sister, Samantha's sister, died just as your sister died, and then there was that process of grief for your whole family. Can you describe a little bit of that?
In real life, so what happened with me when my sister was diagnosed, I feel like I started grieving as soon as I knew that she had stage 4 cancer, because I knew she was, unless a miracle happened, I knew that she was going to die. So that was, I grieved really during her whole illness. And afterwards, so in the book, what Samantha does though is, Elizabeth died in April. So in July, Samantha went to Nantucket, and she just, she spent a lot of summers there during her whole life. But that particular summer was totally different. She wasn't in the mood to go out for dinner with a lot of people and go to cocktail parties. So what she did was she started taking this basket weaving class, and she started taking writing classes. So I don't know if you're familiar with the Nantucket baskets. They're pocketbooks, and
tell us.
They're called the lightship baskets, and they sell them on Main Street in Nantucket. They could cost anywhere from in the hundreds to the thousands, depending on which designer made them. So Samantha decided she was going to make her own. So she spent the summer in some guy's basement with 8 other women, and she weaved. She made a cocktail purse. And it was very therapeutic for her. And she made her own for a fraction of the price. So you had to learn a lot of the writing craft in order to come out with this, right? Yes.
Was that a difficult process, or was that a good process? Or
it was both. I feel that by becoming a writer and doing all of this, it changed my life. It was difficult to learn the craft, but I'm still taking classes. I still love to take classes, but I studied a lot. I couldn't stop writing after my sister died. So at first it would, I'd write and write and write and write, and it was almost like journaling. And then I would take that, and the next day I would edit it. And then all of a sudden it became better. And then I would take the classes at Grub Street, and I'd submit my pages, and we went through a workshop program where they'd say, okay, well, this is very good, this works for the story, but this is not. So it was
You
great.
had other people critiquing your work and things. I know.
And then I learned how to critique other people's work by being in the classes. Not that I was an expert, but it was a great way to learn, because you had to look at other people's work through a writer's eye.
And it's a process of discovery, isn't it? When you're writing, you discover, and part of the healing process, as you mentioned.
Yes. Yeah, because you're writing, and then sometimes you don't know where the pen's going to take you or where the typewriter's going to take you.
So, are you working on another book now, or?
I'm thinking about what to write now. I
Yeah.
definitely have to write another book.
Yeah.
Because I don't want this to be it. Because I enjoy writing. I'm on the board of Grub Street right now.
Yeah.
I like taking classes, and I got to have like a new life from writing. So yes. I've been thinking of different books to write.
Yeah.
Of different topics. To write.
Different topics. So, would it be fiction, or are
No,
you gonna,
fiction.
Yeah. So
Totally fiction this time.
Oh,
not even inspired by a true story. Totally fiction.
I found the book very engaging from the beginning, where you know how it's going to end, but the process is very deep. Did you have to do something to keep the reader's attention? Because we all know how stage 4 cancer ends. Yeah.
I did. Well, that's why I had to make it a novel.
Well, Sondra, it was so good to have you on the show here and talking about your debut novel, Appearances. I look forward to your another novel that comes out. This is New England Authors. We're here in Cambridge, Massachusetts recording, and we broadcast on stations throughout New England. Remember, watch locally.